It is always from within. We are suffering from within and we're being happy from within. But we imagine it's on the outside. And that's the attachment and the problem.
Awareness, the final frontier. This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, fellow explorers, to Awareness Explorers. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Robinson, and with my friend and co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
And we have a special guest today. And as usual, Brian knows a lot about her, and I am just being introduced to her. But I do have a bio, so let me read a little bit about Cindy Teevens. Cindy Teevens is an award-winning international peace, happiness, and spiritual facilitator, exceptional and unique in helping people shift their state and perspective and transforming their lives from the inside out. One day in the woods, she was knocked to her knees by an explosion of love that was followed by the end of time and space, self and other. And 40 years of self-baggage suddenly fell away. The thinker and speaker she thought she was gone, yet the self remained. Cindy is writing about that direct seeing of self in a third book she is working on. She's the author of Alchemy, How to Feel Good No Matter What, and The Happiness Lie, What Generations Have Been Told That Makes You Unhappy. Well, that's quite a bio, Cindy. Looking forward to knowing a little bit about you. But something that stood out in your bio is The Happiness Lie. Tell us how you came up with I have a website called findinghappiness.com, and I've written various books about happiness. So I'm interested in your perspective of the happiness lie.
Oh, I'm so happy to engage on this topic with you and get your perspective also, having just recently discovered you. I think everybody should be interested in happiness. I think everybody is actually interested in happiness, you know. The happiness lie came about because after what I call the direct seeing and discovering the love and the joy within, I started working with people and I kept hearing the same things over and over and over. And one day it came out of my mouth. I don't know where I was, who I was talking with, but I said, that's a lie. That's a happiness lie. And the happiness lie is the belief that things, people, or events make us happy or unhappy. Because, of course, if you believe that something makes you happy, you have to, what comes with that is the belief that things, people, or events make you unhappy. And it's just not true. That's not what's actually going on.
Yeah, I totally agree. First, before I give you my perspective on it, I just want to say that a few days ago, we recorded an episode that will probably be out by the time people watch this, where we talk about our favorite movies and books. And if we had recorded that after I read The Happiness Lie, I would have had to bump one of those books and put that book on the list because it is one of my favorite books. And one of the big discoveries of my life was discovering that I could be happy even when I was sad. In other words, happiness isn't dependent on certain emotions appearing or not appearing. And similarly, you wrote, you don't need a reason to be happy. And even with reason to be unhappy, like a bad thought, you can be happy. I think, and so it really is a topic that's after my own heart.
It is wonderful. Yeah. What I noticed is that I can't be happy and sad at the same time, at the exact same time. You cannot. But you can switch. I mean, we see it all the time with children. We're born with that ability. One minute they're crying, and then the next minute they're laughing and giggling. So we have this ability. It's innate in us, but we don't know it as adults. We've lost touch with that, but we still have that ability to do this state shift, and that's what alchemy, I call it alchemy, is all about. It's a state shift.
I'm curious, Cindy, do you teach specific methods for creating that state shift? Is it something, in your case, it sounded like it happened all at once?
Yeah, I do teach a method, and it's actually called Alchemy. But here's the backstory on how it happened.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was doing my own inner suffering about a breakup. I thought it was about a breakup. You know,
Hmm.
that's never what our suffering is about. It's not about things, people, or events. And in the middle of that suffering, okay, I came to a point of I can't take it anymore. And that led me to the thought of suicide. But you see, my father died by suicide.
Hmm.
And after that event, I promised that his suffering and all of our family's suffering would not be for nothing. And so suicide was out of the option. It wasn't an option, it wasn't a solution to me for my suffering. But I didn't know what else to do because I believed all the things everybody else believes also. So, but I was doing a lot of wanting. I saw this. You know, the mind was full of I want, I want, I want, I want. And even though there was this I want, the reality was I don't have. And I saw that it didn't matter how much I wanted, I wasn't getting what I wanted, but I was getting pain. So I saw that this wanting, this mental wanting, was the pain. But right in the moment of I can't take anymore, but I don't know what to do, I just stopped. And in that moment, I knew or heard, you can give yourself whatever you want, you know, because want was top of my mind. I want, and I can. And I said, if that's true, then it's here, it's within me, it's not out there. And my wanting was, I want something, someone out there. And so I fully turned inward to look, to find the thing so I could give it to myself. Lo and behold, I found it. But this question popped into my mind. Okay, if that's true, what do I want? And I didn't know at first. I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want to be disrespected. I didn't want to be dumped. I didn't want to have lack of love and blah, blah, blah. And suddenly, all of the energy that was being used to suffer over what I didn't want shifted over into what I do want. Bang, there it was. Love, respect, human dignity, boom, boom, boom. Every single one of them, when I looked for them, here they were. And so I had this very radical shift from pain and suffering into this love and joy. And then I went back into the pain and suffering again. But I hadn't missed it. I was like, what was that? So I, looked for it again. And bang, there it was again. And so I was experiencing these wild swings, up, down, up, down, up, down. And if I'd known anything about psychology or whatnot, or if I'd heard the word bipolar, I might have thought that's my problem, but I didn't. I paid attention to what was going on, and I saw what was causing my pain. And I saw that the source of love and joy was me, actually. It's me. It's not just within me, it is me. And so, because I didn't want the pain anymore and I came to zero tolerance, no more suffering, that's it, no more, I learned to stabilize in the love and joy, and that brought freedom. And so that brought even more joy. But there were weeks of going back and forth, for a little while, a couple of weeks, not too long, 3 weeks maybe, where I would be unconscious and find myself in suffering again. I'd be out walking somewhere, and then I'd wake up out of it and go, wait, what do I want? And I would find what I wanted, and then I would feel what I wanted. And it was, first it was relief, and I did it again and again and again for the relief. And one day I just stayed there a little bit longer, and it turned into bliss. It grew and it grew and it grew. The longer I stayed with it and recognized it and enjoyed it and appreciated it, it just grew and grew and grew. And I became ecstatic over 9 months, no matter what was going on. And there, by conventional means, my life wasn't perfect. I had $30,000 in debt. I had a back injury. I had pain. I had been dumped. All these things, nothing was so-called right in the world. I became blissful, ecstatic for no reason.
Mm.
simply because it's what I wanted, simply because it's what I wanted, it's what I preferred.
And you found out what you wanted wasn't out there in the world or in any circumstances, it was inside. And you said one key thing, you said, it was me. So this happiness is you? I mean, is it, how does that work?
Yeah, ultimately, it is, the self, which is the next story that'll be coming out in the next book. Uh, the self is existence, consciousness, bliss. And that's what I am. And that's the only thing there is. And that's what everybody is. So it's our nature. Our true nature is happiness, love, joy. That's why I say that you don't need anything to be happy. You have to have something to be unhappy, which would be an unhappy thought that you are saying is real and true, that you are saying you have to feel because A, B, C, D happened. But it's not true. That's the happiness lie. And if you find that out, and if you prove the mind wrong, you can switch right in the moment like I did. And so there is this method, which I call alchemy. It's a transformation to switch states. And we have 5 powers that this body was born with. Everybody has them, but they're not aware of them. They're not conscious of them. And they go on autopilot, unconscious autopilot, and it causes havoc. We don't know what we're doing to cause our pain. And we don't know that it's happening. And we're believing the story in the mind, and we're completely out of control. And that's the human dysfunction that causes the human condition that we're all waking up out of, constantly, incessantly thinking and dreaming the mind and feeling the mind and experiencing the mind as if it's the reality, as if it's real and true, and not discerning the difference.
Mm-hmm. I'm struck, Cindy, by your question, which I think is probably the most underrated question. What do I want now? And that we do tend to focus on what we don't want. So that's certainly going to be the first step. But a lot of people, even if they may know what they want, they might say, I want inner peace. They don't necessarily get the change that you went through. I'm wondering what allowed that to happen, or what do you think made that change so real to you?
Yeah, well, you pinpointed it right there. They're feeling upset in some way, and they say, I want inner peace. Well, you can't feel upset and have inner peace at the same time. You can't have them both. You have to give one up.
Mm-hmm.
And what led me to the method was I had a friend who, I was building up this, I was just ready to burst. I had to tell somebody. Everywhere I went, I was like a kid in the candy store. The happiness, the joy, it's all free. Don't y'all know it's all free? You've got to find this out. It's got to be on your bucket list. I'm like this, ready to burst everywhere I go. I was, waiting in a lineup. I could wait for hours. It doesn't matter. I'm happy, and I just wanted to scream to everybody who was, so seriously working. I was like, don't you know you could be doing what you're doing in happiness?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I was ready to burst, and I went to visit this friend, and I said, I can tell her. So I'm all ready to just say, everything is fabulous. And I get there and she's down. And I'm like, okay, can't quite tell her yet. I had to ask her, what's going on? What's up here? And then she started to tell me. And as she did, the words for the first time came out of me because I was remembering my shift. Okay. So and I saw that everything she was telling me was what she didn't want. And so that's what she was experiencing, what she didn't want. Isn't that odd?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's not that odd though. It's because that's most people's modus operandi.
Yeah. To
Things
focus
I
on what
want.
I don't want and therefore feel it, but it's what you don't want. And until this clicks, you keep doing it. And there's reasons for that. But so I'm with her and the first question comes out of my mouth. What do you want? What do you want? And she put her attention on what she did want. And then I just kept her talking about it. She talked more and more and more about it. And the more she talked about it, the better she felt. And then the wisdom came. When you shift your state, wisdom comes. And then,
Mm-hmm.
oh, maybe it's not like that. Oh, maybe it's not so. And boom, the whole thing was gone. The whole thing that didn't exist, it was gone. And more questions came out of me. 2 more questions came out of me as I remembered my shift. But I went away thinking, whoa, it's not just me. Everybody can do this. But I wanted to be sure. So I let it be for a week, And then I called her up like a week later. And this thing was driving her mad. It was so terrible that she had to take weeks off of work. She couldn't function at work. And so, I let a week go by and I phoned her up and I say, hey, how are you doing? And she told me all kinds of things. She never mentioned one thing about that problem. And then I said, what about that other problem that we spoke about? Oh, that? Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Long gone. And I went, this is important. This is good, And so I started testing it out on other people.
I'm curious, Cindy, what kinds of questions you asked her or people to get them more deeply into what they want, because a lot of times people, they'll almost ignore that question so that they can say more of what they don't want.
Can you think of a purple pineapple?
I can think of one, yes.
Did you just see one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Involuntarily, right? That's the power of a question. As soon as I ask a question, bang, you get an answer. It's miraculous. And so the first question is, what do you want? And now this can be hard for people, believe it or not.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And so it's taken me years of working with people, but I have honed this down to an art to be able to get them to follow me through the questions so that they can experience the shift that looks almost magical to other people and to them in the moment, quite frankly. And then for the wisdom to come after it that really anchors it in. And so when I first asked, what do you want? Here's what I found. In our language, we have so many words for what we don't want. It's incredible the number of words we have for what we don't want. We don't have as many for the words we like. The first thing when people say, when I ask them that question, usually is, I want to feel good. And that won't cut it. And you also can't skip it. This is not a denial of anything. So if you come in and there's someone feeling judged, and I ask them, what do you want? And they go, well, I just want to be happy anyway. It's not going to work. I talk about the candy. It's like if a child came to me, I took their candy away and they were upset. And I said, what do you want? They wouldn't say, oh, I want to be okay without the candy. No, they're going to say, no, I want the candy, right? So I always say to them, what's the candy? Let the child speak. What's the candy? I want respect. And it's got to be specific. So it's the antidote. If they're feeling disrespectful, the antidote's going to be respectful, right? Or being respected. And so then I will ask them, how does being respected feel? And this question is very important, the way you ask this question. You can't change it in any way, shape, or form. And there's reasons for that. How does being respected feel? Not how would it feel? Because a lot of people turn it into that. Yeah, well, if I had that, then I would. No. This is making yourself a victim. You're dependent on a thing, person, or event. No. How how it feels, right? I get them into it. I get them to access it. I have means and ways. And at first, the biggest problem is they think they don't know. We do some work to find it, and then we find it. And then I give them some more questions to help them recognize the feeling is here now. Because there's the fact of somebody, let's say, turning you down, but there's a feeling, and the fact and the feeling are not the same thing. And we have joined them together and confused them with each other. And that's why we suffer. Things, people, or events. But it's not actually things, people, or events we suffer. It's the mind. See? So I extract the mind, which is full of story. It's the unreal mind from the reality so that we can see beyond the mind. and be beyond the mind, because we are beyond the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the mind and its stories is what veils the happiness. I mean, in my experience, happiness is the default state, like you talked about a young baby, and it's covered up by all these thoughts about the past and the future in particularly, but also about what I don't have and what I want. But I'm also curious about wanting and the questions that you ask, because if I'm not a Buddhist, but certainly I've read, as we all have, many, many Buddhist texts, and they all say that desire is the main cause of suffering. And people equate wanting with desire. So, but it sounds like you have a more nuanced view of that, and that you drill down from like what do you say if someone says what I want is a new car, or what I want is a new job? And it sounds like you drill into what the feeling you would get if you had that. Is that right? Or
Yeah, we have to be careful that we don't change the question into if I had it. See, we are so convinced that our feeling comes from an object or a thing or a person. That's the happiness light. We're so convinced by it that people take that question and turn it into if. You see, the if attaches your happiness or your misery to the thing, person, or event. Okay. It says, I can't have it now. Only if I get what I want, then I can be happy. And that is a sure way to make yourself miserable right here, right now. And we're doing it to ourselves. So you were speaking about wanting versus, well, I wrote down wanting versus desire versus attachment. So there's wanting that feels good, and there's wanting that feels bad. So the wanting that feels bad says, I don't have it and I have to have it or I can't be happy. And then there's just, you want what is, you just love what is. This feels good. I just love this as it is. And attachment, there's actually no such thing as attachment to a thing, a person, or an event. It's just a thought. It's a belief. It's the happiness lie. The happiness lie is a belief that things, people, or events control your happiness. And it doesn't, you're calling the shots. You say, because of this, therefore that. Okay. And nobody else is. Everybody's rules are different. You ever notice there are some people who don't like their partner flirting with someone else? They don't like that. And there's other people who like that. Right? If there was a fundamental reality to this, we wouldn't have this discrepancy. But there isn't. You're making up the rules that you're living and experiencing by. So you're free to change the rules. You don't like the suffering.
I'm curious if over time, this was at first like you would have to go through this process, and then it kind of became automatic that you were just like being filled up from within.
That's a fabulous question. And yeah. So it is always from within. We are suffering from within, and we're being happy from love within, right? But we imagine it's on the outside, and that's the attachment and the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I went around at first, these ups and downs, wild swings. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't realize, what I was doing with my powers that I spoke about earlier, one of them being attention. And so I was having these wild swings of attention in and out of the mind and in various different places in the mind. And that's called unconsciousness. But I learned to when I say I stabilized it, I stabilized my attention, but I didn't know that. I didn't have words for this actually in the beginning. Okay, I was just doing it. I was just seeking relief. I just wanted it so desperately because I'd had enough suffering and there was no other option. So I just went for love, joy, peace. At first it was relief, and then it grew, and there's methods to grow it beyond belief. And then it stabilized, and I continued to seek it because I became curious. What happened one day was I was feeling really good, and then it grew. And then I had this thought come in and go, you can't feel that good. No, nothing's happened. You didn't get anything. And the state dropped. And I was like, what? But I already had it. I already was. And I had this thought that said I can't, but I was. Like, so I quit believing the mind. I quit following the mind so much that day, or began not to, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what stabilized it. But I also became very curious because it got better. And then the mind said it couldn't, but it already had. And then I wondered, how good can it get? Can it get even better? And so I went around for 9 months seeking this love and joy within, but I still had the happiness lie operating a little bit. And I thought, well, this is the kind of love you get from a person. I don't have a person. Well, but I heard somewhere, I don't know where I picked this up, I formed the idea of the beloved within. Maybe I got that from Rumi, I don't know. But I would look for the beloved within because I still had separation operating anytime I wanted it. And it grew and it grew and it grew to mind-blowing states of bliss, joy, ecstasy for no reason at all. Just because I looked for it, there it was. Just because I enjoyed it and appreciated it, it grew. Until that day in the woods when it exploded. I didn't think it could get any better. But that day in the woods, there was an explosion of love at the chest that then shot up, hit my head, through my head, knocked me to my knees, crying with the intensity of this love, bawling, tears dripping down my eyes. And from my knees, I looked up at the trees and I saw, it's me. It's me. And I looked around and everything, it's me. It's all me. This is myself. And I fell into the snow and laughed and cried. And I was crying, laughing so hard. It reminded me of when you were a kid and someone's tickling you too hard and long. And then this, sort of, is this going to hurt at some point? But no, it never hurt. I just laughed and laughed and laughed. I went to say it's me and nothing came out. I couldn't speak. But who would I speak to? Because it's me. I just knew it. And I just stayed out there laughing and crying, laughing and crying. And then the sun went down. And as the sun was going down, I remembered, oh, I'm co-hosting a party tonight. Eventually, the mind came back. But when it did, it was way over there to the left of me and tiny and faint and weak. And I kind of went, I know who I am. Who the hell are you? But I had a memory that that's who I used to think I was. Like I knew that I used to think that voice was me. And here I am now without it, gone completely to the point I can't even speak. I could never again take the voice to be me.
And so thinking that that voice is you, is that what many spiritual teachers talk about, the illusion of the sense of the separate self, and that we need to let go of that? And you didn't talk directly about this in your book because it focused on happiness, but the way you describe it, it sounds similar. In other words, seeing that that voice in your head isn't you. Is that what the separate self is that they talk about?
It's what we base it upon largely, the voice in the head. We also base it upon the body. We believe that this is a separate body, separate from everything else. I mean, there was more to what happened in the woods that I won't go into here, but it involved, and prior to that, I was doing self-inquiry, trying to find myself. And that day, I included everything I ever did: love, joy, peace, all the powers, and inquiry. I combined it all at once. And if you look up the 7 factors of awakening, which is taken to be, I suppose, enlightenment, they have to all be there. Joy, okay, concentration, inquiry. There's 7 of them there. And they all have to be there. And if there's one missing, it's like a garden. It requires all of the conditions in order for plants to grow. And if one is missing, nothing's going to grow. And so it's not just the voice, although that's a large part of it.
Mhm.
It is this whole idea that we have believed that there is separation, that what I am is a separate being, and you're a separate being, and we're all in a separate world. And I have ways and means of showing people that that's just not a fact. It's a thought, not a fact.
Mhm.
And this will clash with what we have convinced ourselves to be true and real. We've convinced ourselves of separation, of a separate world, even an objective world. Language itself, and this is why it is so integral, language itself, grammar. It doesn't matter what language. Grammar is subject, object, right? That's where subject object comes from. It's built into language. And we not just speak to other people with language, we speak to ourselves all day long. Language, subject object all day long, when there isn't any.
Mhm.
And it's provable in your direct experience. And this is what these practices endeavor to reveal to us, that these are lies. There's a happiness lie, there's the self lie. Maybe that's a title for another book. I don't know.
I certainly would read it.
So, Cindy, I'm curious, when you work with people, how you work with them, and what you found might be the things that they say that they want.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing them back up, because I don't feel I answered it fully for you. When I ask people what do they want, they usually try to skip the candy.
Mhm.
They want to be bigger. I just want to be spiritual and bigger than, and they, and you can't skip the candy. And what everybody wants in the end is to be happy. And we're going about it the most convoluted ways. We're trying to manipulate the world because we believe the world's going to give us this happiness. We believe the world is making us unhappy. And so we have to change the world so that we can be happy. It'll never work. It's futile.
So it
And
sounds to me like you're saying you can't skip the candy. You can't start with, oh, I want to be happy. And so you start with the candy, what you want. I want a relationship. I want a better job. And you work your way back. But eventually you end up with, I want to be happy anyway. But if you go directly to that, it sounds like that it's too general or something. Am I understanding correctly?
well, you don't start with I want to be happy. You start with I am unhappy.
Uh-huh.
You start with I need this, I need that. I need this thing, person, or an event in order to be. So you're already unhappy. And then you still don't have it in reality, and you believe you need it in reality. And then you just try to tell yourself to be happy anyway, even though you still believe you need it to be happy. You see, this is denial. This is a not seeing your own attachment. Until you deal with the attachment, you can't be happy. You're faking it. Okay. And I'm all about keeping it real.
Yeah.
I'm the spiritual facilitator who keeps it real. And that is the only way to lasting happiness. You can have a temporary nice thought idea and something uplifting. You can go get motivated. It's not going to last. Why? The biggest problem is unconscious suffering of the mind, unconscious dreaming the mind, believing what the mind says. And doing that, you feel the mind. You must feel the mind until you start to see beyond the mind, have insight. I work toward having people have insights beyond the mind. And until you start to do that, you're dreaming the mind, experiencing the mind. We are in the driver's seat of the mind, oblivious to the fact that we are. And we're either asleep at the wheel or drunk at the wheel. And we're drunk.
Or both.
Or both. Exactly.
I'm a psychotherapist by training, and I noticed, as you have, that people are very clear about what they don't want and very fuzzy about what they do want. I found that the question, what don't you want, is very helpful, because then the opposite tends to be what they want.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right there. And sometimes I go there, but when I have someone who's in a really bad state, I do
Mm-hmm.
not start with what don't you want, because whoom, off they go
Yeah,
and
right,
they may
right.
never come back, you know. So my starting point is always, what do you want? And if they have great difficulty with that, then what I do is I say, okay, when did this problem start? Because you weren't always like this.
Mm-hmm.
So then they'll, oh, well, okay, take me to that point in time. You were fine, you were happy, and all of a sudden you weren't.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
And then I say, what happened? What changed? And then it comes out, right? Well, this happened, blah, blah. And I hear all the time, I hear the reality and I hear the story. I separate the two. And this is one of the
Mm-hmm.
powers that people need to discover and practice. After the direct seeing, I was hearing it everywhere. Red flags. I was hearing all the lies. I was hearing, I had this group of women that I hung out with. They were sort of spiritual friends, and we would have a meal once a month and, watch a movie together. And I went there after, a couple of days after this happened, and they were just throwing up the lies everywhere. And I just sitting here saying nothing, and which wasn't my usual way of engaging. I just didn't say anything. And I had to learn or relearn how to be with people who are suffering and dreaming and telling stories that I know aren't true. They're just like red flags to me now.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm working with someone, I hear it and I separate it out, and I can help them separate it out so they can see beyond the lie, beyond the mind.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar at all with the Sedona method?
Yes, I am. I did encounter that sometime before discovering the joy within and the direct seeing subsequently.
Uh-huh.
It went so far for me. It didn't, for whatever reason. I hear some people, and potentially the originator, Levinson, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, went further, but I guess it did something for me at the time.
Didn't go all the way.
Nope, didn't go all the way. That was a big thing. I was seeking, my father died of suicide, and then I promised him it wouldn't be for nothing, and the family, and that started me on this quest to find an end to suffering. And everything I tried, nothing went all the way. I did NLP, and then I did NLP master, and I still knew that wasn't all the way. Somehow I knew, I
Do you
became.
think, Cindy, do you think that the NLP, because in some ways you got really good at accessing peace, love, and joy very directly, which are inside ourselves. But some people, even if you give them that idea, they just can't find it. I'm wondering if you think what made that so successful for you.
That's funny. I was just speaking with a client who I've known for some years. And when I first met her, she said things like, no, I just don't love. I don't know. I think maybe I'm a monk at heart. I just can't access love. There's no love here. She
Uh-huh.
just booms with love all over. This is the thing. When I work with people, they say things that are lies.
Mm-hmm.
There was a young man, for example. He came to a booth I was at, and he was all disturbed because he had this major problem that he had these two job offers and he didn't know which one to take. So he was distressed. And I'm like, great problem to have, like I had no jobs. But he was distressed. I could see this. And then he was sitting down. He also said, yeah, I'm never happy either. I'm never happy. And so I had a conversation with him. And the next thing he's smiling and laughing. I said, look, you're happy. And he went, no, no. He shifted state like that, like we're all capable of.
Uh-huh.
So when we're telling a story, when we're dreaming, we're unconsciously telling a story, we're feeling that story. You must feel it. When you stop feeling it. That's a wake up
Mm-hmm.
moment. See, I look at awakening and I discuss awakening in ways that I don't hear anybody else talk about, honestly. Awakening is not the big E, the big enlightenment thing. This is every day. People wake up during your day multiple times a day. They have not recognized it yet. They don't know what it means. Here's an example. I was suffering, my intensive sufferings in the kitchen, chopping carrots. Actually, I was fine. I was fine chopping carrots in 1 minute. And then the next minute I was suffering and I dropped the knife and I fell to the floor bawling. And then my cat came up to me and licked my nose. And that was a wake-up moment. And I looked at the cat and it was kind of humorous. And I looked up. I'm like, what am I doing on the floor? And then I kind of started laughing. I said to the cat, can't you see I'm suffering here? And I went, so it was funny for a moment. I'm like, what the hell was that? Like, what just happened? I was perfect. I know that I was perfectly fine. And then I wasn't. It's like, something is going on here. I didn't know what. I didn't know how. But now that I saw, now that I glimpsed, I had an insight. I started to pay attention. NLP, I can't credit NLP. I use some of the technique, not the techniques. I use some of the personal techniques when I'm speaking with people, but I don't use any of the NLP techniques anymore. Mm-hmm. It was paying attention that taught me. So I became very attentive. I became a Zen student, which is where you will really learn about attention and dreaming, all on your own. And because I started to pay attention outside of the mind, not just the stories and the thoughts in the mind, outside the mind, I started to see things I'd never seen before that went against what the mind was saying. And it was though, when you pay attention, you have an insight. And an insight is wordless. It's a recognition of something you know without a thought. You just know it. It's sort of like if I told you that your stove was hot, do you know that your stove is hot? No, right? You have to have your own direct knowing that the stove is hot. A thought's not going to cut it, right? So that's what when I work with people, that's what I offer, is having these direct recognitions for yourself beyond the mind. Mm-hmm.
Is there any question that we should be asking that we haven't gotten to?
Probably what the 5 powers are, but if you ask me that, I won't tell you. Here's why.
Okay.
I have actually mentioned them in this conversation, but most people won't know it. I told you one was attention. And the reason I won't tell what they are is because I rather people experience them. Because the impact of experiencing them and going, oh, this will leave a mark, it will do its job. And so I, with the Inner Peace on Demand experience that I show people, I do talk about one of the powers. I can do a version of it where I actually talk about almost all of the powers, but there's one power I will not talk about. It has to be seen in a live conversation. It has to be, I like to have what I call our conscious conversations that trigger conscious awakening. And that power, it can only be recognized in one of those conversations. If I just told you what they were, I'd be cheating you, Oh, you have it mentally now. And everybody says, I get it mentally. I get it mentally that we're not separate, that we're only one. I get it it's not good enough. Everybody knows it's not good enough. Yeah. You want it. They say, I want it in my bones. They want it in their direct experience. That's why I'm so all over having a direct experience over and over and over until the things that we've put into place, the ideas, the beliefs, the constructs that we have convinced ourselves of start to fall away. Yeah. That happened. That was happening before the direct seeing also. But I'd have to talk more about the powers. Well, we could, I don't know how much time you guys have.
Well, what do you say, Brian?
Well, we have time.
So there's two ways to talk about the inner peace on demand. One is without revealing the powers, all of them. And that's the one I'm going to offer today. And there's also some ways just to share what happened to me without revealing all the powers too. So the subject was the insights that I was having that went against the mind, the beliefs, the stories, that, working up to what I call the direct seeing in the woods. It wasn't one fell swoop. Okay. There was a huge fell swoop, but it would not have happened had these other ones not happened, these other little insights. So in this time period when I was experiencing ever-growing love, joy, and bliss, just for the looking for it, discovering it right here, right now. Oh, I started to tell you before. In this process of looking for love and joy and peace, I was pursuing it actively because I became so curious. How good can it get? And I became obsessed with it, like you would become obsessed with a lover when you fall in love. But I had fallen in love with love itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be pursuing it. And so I stayed to myself a lot. I would go out in the woods alone where I could have this experience. And there'd be times I'd be just out there grinning, just standing there grinning. And people would walk by and go, "What are you looking at?" And I'd say, "Everything." Mm-hmm. And they're like, "Okay, thought you saw a deer or something, something to get happy about." Oh, everything is to get happy about. Anyway, I was pursuing this love, and till the day it started pursuing me. I thought I was in control of it. But it started to happen when I was in grocery stores. It happened when I was in a restaurant, just looking at a rusty nail in the corner of the window. You'd have these breakouts and, crying jags and love filled. And so that was happening leading up to the direct seeing. So it was like it was pursuing me. Yeah. And so I went even more out into the woods before this thing happened. And during this seeking of it, I had these little breakthroughs. They were big to me at the time, but I call them little now, where I'd be in the car and a song would come on that I'd love, and I'd crank it up. And the sound, when the sound went out into the windshield, I went out into the windshield. That was kind of the experience. And then when I was walking by this beautiful maple tree, it was red, yellow, gorgeous, the wind came up and did that. And it was me that went, not the tree, And then we had this ice storm, and I was out walking in the woods, and everything was glittering. The snow was so beautiful. I felt so rich with snow, which was even funnier, which even made it more beautiful. But one day I reached out and I grabbed a shiny ice-covered twig and kind of turned it sideways, and the ice cracked. But it was like the whole tree and the whole earth and I cracked. Another time I came to the river and I leaned down and put my hand in the water and realized I was touching the other side of this mighty river. Mm. So these experiences were eroding the idea of separation. Oh, there was another one. I was walking in the woods again, and all of a sudden smelled pine trees, powerful. Smelled it, and then I taste it too. I'm like, I'm tasting the tree. I'm not tasting the tree. It's not the tree, it's me. These insights were gradually chipping away at me, who I am, where I am, what I am. The boundaries were becoming blurred. I was letting the idea of me go. Mm-hmm. As I discovered the reality of me more and more in little bits. And there came a time when I was seeking my true self that I knew I didn't know myself, and that's really weird. And it became the most important thing. I had to find out. This was my bucket list, the only bucket list item. I had to find out. And that's what I was then seeking, because I had everything else. Well, I didn't have everything in the material world. I still, it was still a mess that way. But I had everything else, and that I'm happy. Everywhere I go, whatever I do, I'm happy. Once you're that fulfilled, the thought arises, what's next? What now, right? There's only one thing I wanted, and that's to know the source of this love and this joy.
Mm-hmm.
I still had separation in my mind, but I was seeking this with all my heart. Nothing else mattered as much. I still functioned in the world, but I was in love, joy, bliss, ecstasy. I've heard stories of people having awakenings, in suffering, and then they suffer more later or something. That wasn't my case. I was in utter ecstasy when I saw. And seeing is an important thing, because these other experiences they were hearing, they were touching, they were tasting, I hadn't yet seen. And of course, that was the last piece, because we're quite convinced with our vision via the mind, which is in the way. And you mentioned earlier, the mind is the problem. It's not the mind alone. The mind is not the problem. It's not an enemy. There's something else going on here. It's us having convinced ourselves via the mind that we are separate entities. That's the false self. And that has to be taken down. And people do that, and they suffer doing that. And you have to have all 7 factors to see the truth. So suffering is not going to get you there. You could call it a happy accident for me. I got ever more blissful. I didn't care about myself anymore. This me, it was not happy. I preferred this love and joy over this me. That's one of the things that happened in the woods too, is I surrendered me. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't care about it. I cared about this love, and it was just ever growing. So there was no fear either.
Wow, that's like a beautiful poem.
Mm-hmm. I hear you have a meditation that you can guide us and our listeners on, and then we can come back and resume.
Sure. I call it inner peace on demand, or the 2-minute technique to inner peace. As I mentioned, we have 5 powers that most of us don't know we have. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to talk about your second power, your power of attention. Are you feeling your right foot right now? Now that I mentioned it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What happened before? It was there. Your foot wasn't gone, right? So our power of attention has 2 modes, open and closed. When we close and we contract our attention onto something, we appear to eliminate everything else. So we become blind, deaf, and ignorant to reality when we contract our attention onto the mind. And the mind, the stories in it, the feelings, the thoughts, they get magnified. So if you contract your attention onto your foot right now, you can have the experience of the foot magnifying and everything else kind of fading into the background. You could also open your attention. Talk about that in a moment. So, can you feel into your feet? Yes. Can you feel into the top of your head? Or sense into the top of your head? Okay. And can you sense into your left shoulder? Okay, what happened to your foot? Still there. This is your attention contracting, going from body part to body part, opening and closing. Okay. Now, I would like you to sense into your feet and the top of your head at the same time. To do this, you need to open your attention. So notice your feet, the top of your head at the same time. Take in your peripheral vision. You'll have to open your eyes for this. So just pick a spot in front of you. Keep your eyes steady on that spot. And as you do you notice your peripheral vision? Yeah. Just keep your eyes steady. Feel your feet, the top of your head. Take in your peripheral vision. And now notice your breath moving in and moving out, because you are breathing. And do that for a few in and out breaths. What's that like?
It all appears in one space, the top of the head, the foot, the breathing, the point. It's not a bunch of different, it all appears in one, I guess, awareness.
Yeah. Is it calm?
Yes.
Is it peaceful?
Yes.
Is it quiet?
Oh, yes.
Why is it quiet? You can hear things. Why is it quiet?
Quiet is this, like the space that sounds appear.
What's absent?
Wanting, suffering, thinking.
Nothing big. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thoughts are absent or slowed down.
Yeah.
That's because you've withdrawn your power from them. You've taken it out of the mind. You've put it in the senses. I also call this coming to your senses. Whoever first coined that, I don't know if they knew how important it was for the true impact of this coming to your senses. So I often, when I'm working with people, will suggest they come to their senses, right? At first, when you first learn about it, I guide you through it. Feel your feet, the top of your head, take in your peripheral vision, notice your breath moving in and moving out. But you can sum it up by come to your senses. Mm-hmm. And you can do it in 2 seconds, not even 2 minutes. But if I told people that, they wouldn't believe me. So we'll go for a 2-minute technique. And that's just using, well, it's not just using your power of attention. You are using your other powers, you just don't know it yet. And you can do this anytime, any place. You don't need anything. Yeah. You could be doing it in a conversation with someone and they don't know you're doing it.
Generally, our senses are with us wherever we are.
That's right. That's a hint, Jonathan.
On a good day.
It's a big pointer. Uh-huh. Everywhere you go, there you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have access to this on demand.
How can people get in touch with you or learn about your work, Cindy?
My new podcast called mindblind.show, mindblind.show. It is all about how our brilliance has brought us to the brink of extinction and the edge of enlightenment.
Yeah, both are happening nowadays at breakneck speed.
Yeah, and we need to speed up the maturity. We have the IQ. We don't have enough EQ, but now I want to have AQ,
Which
the
is
awareness quotient,
Love it.
which is why I love the name of your show.
Oh, perfect. And you also have a website, your regular website?
Yeah, you can reach me at cindyteevens.com or alchemylovejoy.com. They go to the same place. Everything goes to the same place.
There's a pointer.
There's a pointer.
Oh, what a delight.
Mm.
It's so funny because I almost can't think of anything to say right now after that.
Perfect. Just enjoy.
Yeah.
I appreciate of the many takeaways, just almost as a mantra, using, well, what do I want right now?
Yeah.
It's a really good starting point.
Yeah. First two questions. What do I want? How does it feel?
How does it feel? Yeah.
Those are the first two questions of alchemy. They're the most important. They will cause the shift in state if they're applied right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, find out what it is that you want. It's going to be the opposite of what you don't want, as you pointed out, Jonathan. And if it's not that, then it won't work. If you've got the wrong thing you're imagining you want, you're not going to shift state. It's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Cindy. Very, very fruitful conversation and very useful as well.
Thank
Any
you.
last words, Brian?
Just what a delight. And I'm very grateful that you could come on, and I can't wait for our listeners to hear it as well.
Thank you. It's a delight speaking with both of you.
And to our listeners, thanks to our Patreon supporters. We give a bunch of extra stuff to you. If you sign up at patreon.com/awareness explorers. And you can explore that and explore some of what Cindy said today. I think it'll lead to a great benefit. Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.